And we're back like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for joining me on this somewhat slightly warmer Monday early evening here in New York. We've just been getting smashed by lousy weather. I'll take 50 degrees and rain over 25 and windy any day of the week and twice on Sunday. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Today marks the 30th anniversary of the release of a much beloved comedy that became, I guess you could say, a franchise. There were a couple of sequels, one of which was a direct sequel. I didn't watch either of the sequels, but more so than just an anniversary of a release of a movie. It's an anniversary of a kind of a coming superstar who hit and had one of the most incredible years than anyone really ever had, pumping out 3 massive hit movies in the same year where he's the primary star. It's not something that happens. Maybe it happened in the 50s during the studio system when you could pump out those movies one after another because they were mostly shot on studio backlots as opposed to actual real locations, which took much more time to set up, prepare, and execute. 30 years ago today, Dumb and Dumber opened in theaters and got decent reviews, was an enormous box office hit, grossing $247+ million. Now, just with that alone, you would say for its primary star, Jim Carrey, and to some extent its secondary star, Jeff Daniels, he had been around for a while already. A big year for Jeff Daniels in 94. He had Speed with Keanu and Sandra Bullock, and the always fire Dennis Hopper, do not attempt to grow a brain. Great lines. Frank Booth, if he decided to try to blow up a bus, don't you fucking look at me! Where's my bourbon, you shithead? Epic. But Dumb and Dumber was Jim Carrey's 3rd hit of 1994. And he was an overnight superstar, but not exactly an overnight success. He had been working in Hollywood for many years. He'd had a pretty significant supporting role in Clint Eastwood's the 5th and final Dirty Harry film, The Deadpool. The first quarter of the movie, the first act, if you will, his character is pretty important. And the other kind of historical tidbit from that film was that a rising Liam Neeson has a bigger supporting role. He plays a filmmaker who suspicion falls on him that he's getting involved in this bizarre kind of sick game called a Deadpool, where you have a list of celebrities that you think aren't going to make it because maybe they're old or they're in a high risk profession. And Clint, as Harry Callahan, goes, "You mean like police work?" He's kind of fucking with him. He and Clint have some great scenes. But Clint, as Harry Callahan, never actually meets Jim Carrey's Johnny Squares. But Jim Carrey impressed Clint Eastwood very early on. He had been on Johnny Carson in 84. There was a TV show he did called The Duck Factory, which there was some hope was going to be, a hit for NBC. It didn't really happen. But Jim Carrey got to do stand-up with OG, the guy, Johnny Carson. And similar from a broad sense, where there were many movie critics that trashed Jim's first movie of 1994, Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, just absolutely eviscerated by almost every leading critic, from Owen Gleiberman with Entertainment Weekly, Roger Ebert, Gene Siskel on down. Almost every major critic not only trashed the film, but trashed the star. And in the case of Owen Gleiberman, who later became an unabashed, enormous fan of Jim Carrey, Siskel and Ebert, who later, at the time of The Truman Show, were by that point huge fans of his. The kind of recurring theme is something that you see if you go to YouTube right now and watch Jim Carrey's first appearance on The Tonight Show. He's about 21, maybe he's 22. When he starts his set, the audience is almost silent. They don't quite get what's happening. It's not hitting that they're seeing something that they ain't ever going to see again. They're seeing this young, unbelievably talented comic. And nobody knew he was going to become a film actor. But they're seeing this ridiculous, revolutionary generational talent doing stuff that they hadn't seen before. And it took a little bit and takes a little bit because you watch the clip. And then there's almost a click where the audience starts to get excited because they realize this guy is different. We're seeing something we've never seen before. And when he finishes the set, Johnny's reaction was simply, wow. Wow. Like he couldn't believe what he had been seeing. So when he worked with Clint on the Deadpool, the joke was, and both guys told this story independently. Jim even mentioned it. I think it was the AFI Lifetime Achievement Award for Clint Eastwood. He told the story that when he showed up and he was hired, the Deadpool, Clint had liked Jim's stand-up. He had seen him and he thought he was funny and said, that I really like this kid, whatever. So Clint is one of the people that definitely helped further Jim Carrey's career. Rodney Dangerfield, another. But the joke is that when Jim came to the set on the Deadpool, and his character the role expanded because he was just such a force of nature, even then, years before his big, kind of splash into superstardom. But he came to Clint, Mr. Eastwood, I have some ideas. Can I go over them with you? Yeah, no problem, kid. So the way that Jim told the story at the tribute is that he said, I had all these ideas, and I knew it was probably going to be too long because my character dies early in the film, spoiler alert. And he goes into all this stuff. And he goes, well, Clint turned to his director of photography and he goes, you know what? Why don't we just turn the camera on and let the kid go? And the audience at the AFI tribute is cracking up. And then they flash to Clint and he's cracking up as Jim's recounting the story, which obviously is exactly what happened. Just turn the camera on and let the kid go. There's a lot in Jim Carrey's career, a lot of ad-libbing, a lot of the camera is on and we're just going to let him go. Now, in the case of a later movie, The Truman Show, Peter Weir, the filmmaker, talked about there were a lot of ad-libs by Jim that he loved personally, but didn't fit the film, what he was attempting to do with the movie. So there's certain things that he didn't end up using in the film. But he was a generational talent. He had ability that didn't make sense, that wasn't like every other great comic. And there's even a delineation because obviously he and Robin Williams were often compared. They started in stand-up. They did TV. In the case of Robin, was an enormous TV star with Mork and Mindy. But they were not the same kind. They had the manic energy, the ability to ad-lib, to launch into impressions. Jim was a better impressionist than Robin. That's not really a knock on Robin. There were other things that Robin did better than anyone. But he was different. Robin was a generational talent, and Jim is a generational talent. So he had a lead in a film that it's a Gen X standard, Once Bitten. And the film was not that successful at the box office. It didn't get really good reviews. It's not a very good movie. It's a teenage boy who thinks he has sex with a hot older woman played by the kind of older model at the time. It was pretty inspired casting of Lauren Hutton. He doesn't have sex. She kind of took a feeding. She's a vampire. She's a countess, and she tries to turn him into a vampire. And the movie is just goofy and ridiculous. But even there, you see he's doing something you have not seen before. His gesticulations, to use a Walt Frazier word, his gyrations. He's doing stuff that you haven't seen. Some people are not ready to receive that in real time. And so as 1994 opened, I had heard about this film. Hey, Jim Carrey, for some of you who know, and he was a very successful stand-up comic. He had his own special on Showtime called Jim Carrey's Unnatural Act. Like, he was a known commodity among a certain segment of movie fans, of fans of stand-up comedy. And as I say, Rodney, he was very well respected because people saw him and said, he's not like every other comic. Yes, he knows how to do setup, punchline. He knows how to tell a joke in 3 acts. But he's operating on a higher frequency, is how you would have described it. So he worked. He was in Earth Girls Are Easy. He has a reasonable supporting role with Jeff Goldblum and Cyndi Lauper. And he got this role, which ended up being a critical role for him, because if you look at his credits, you see a lot of credits from 1985 until Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. And even some movies, like Clint used him again in Pink Cadillac, and his role is basically cut to a cameo. It was supposed to be a bigger role. Bernadette Peters kind of rips on him. He's doing some kind of, it was a bit from his Jim Carrey's Unnatural Act. And Bernadette Peters is like, what the fuck am I looking at? And I actually, it's pretty funny the way that she delivers her lines in that movie. But he gets this role, Ace Ventura. And now, it was a franchise. It was a TV, a cartoon. But back then it was nothing. Nobody knew anything. And the film benefited from a confident production. And when I use the phrase confident production, I mean that it is not low budget. And the filmmakers, the producers, were able to get people for small roles in the film that you wouldn't have expected, such as Dan Marino and the legendary Miami Dolphins head coach, the late, great Don Shula. And I didn't see that movie in theaters. The trailer looked great, but when I say the reviews were bad, they were worse than bad. Owen Gleiberman, who, as I said, became the biggest Jim Carrey fan among critics, even more so than Siskel and Ebert. Owen Gleiberman hated it so much, he gave the film an F. An F. Like, you can't go any lower than F, right? That's the worst grade you can get. And his immortal, legendary line, Jim Carrey plays Ace Ventura like an escaped mental patient impersonating a game show host. Now, if that isn't the living end, as they say, that is just an unbelievable crack at somebody. Credit to Jim for not taking it personally when people like Gleiberman and Siskel and Ebert just savaged his ability. It's not the same as disliking a movie, because later in his career, Cable Guy was not a successful film, didn't do as well at the box office as it should have. But many critics who didn't like the film said, Carrey's performance is ridiculously good. He's the only reason to see this movie. He's just fucking nuts from the movie perspective. And he plays this basically a psycho, and he plays it perfectly. So you could delineate, he's like, once bitten, he's great. Film isn't really very good. But Ace Ventura surprised everybody. I don't know what the projections were. It was mostly still pre-internet era in early 94. But despite the overall lousy reviews, there were enough, and this is, again, ridiculous, but there were enough random critics who liked it that when they advertised the movie in newspapers, they were able to cobble together enough reviews talking about it. This movie's fucking hilarious. I think it helped to get people into theaters. And there also were enough Gen Xers, even though I didn't see it, that saw it and told their friends, movies are right. I don't know what the critics are talking about. And that is why I don't automatically assume the critics know what they're talking about. Yes, they understand film, and there are plenty of movies that I'll give a thumbs down to that you might love. It's always better to see it for yourself. So Ace Ventura made over $100 million at the box office, which surprised everyone. It was, even though it, as I say, confident production, it was not a big budget. Carrey had already been hired. He was already working. He may have actually already been in post-production on The Mask when Ace Ventura landed. Ace Ventura got him Dumb and Dumber, though. That got him Dumb and Dumber. So during that year, now I think The Mask started filming in 93 and it wrapped filming some point because there's a lot of special effects. That's what I mean. Some films just are going to have a longer post-production window no matter what, because the effects work takes some time. And those aren't the kinds of movies where it's going to be Martin Scorsese editing his film for an extra year. You're going to get through the post-production schedule of certain movies quicker than others. By the time The Mask was being promoted, Jim was already, people were saying, this is Hollywood's newest star. The buzz on The Mask was way better than what it had been on Ace Ventura. And people were saying, when this movie hits, he's not just a rising star. This is a superstar in waiting. He's doing things, and he does things in The Mask that a lot of critics who didn't like Ace Ventura, they're going to take a second look and say, okay, this is not accidental. He's not an escaped mental patient impersonating a game show host. I've never seen anything like this before. But when we're exposed to something that we're not familiar with, we're not comfortable with, something that challenges our perceptions of comedy, even of film acting, for some people, we immediately, okay, this is great. And other people, no, thank you. I'm all set here. The Mask landed in June of 1994. I think it was June. And it lit the box office on fire, domestic, but it did even better overseas. And there was always a thing that I used to always talk about it in film school at NYU, that Jerry Lewis was popular in Europe. They love him in Europe. And the other thing about loving in Europe, the late, great Robert Sklar, one of my favorite professors, he wrote the book, Movie Made America, just about the best book ever written about the history of movies in America and how American movies reflected American culture and American culture informed American movies. But Robert Sklar, when he was asked the question, why does it seem that Sylvester Stallone, despite the fact that he makes these red-blooded, testosterone-soaked, blood and guts and big muscles action movies for American audiences, why do they play so well overseas? In Europe, they line up around the block for Stallone. Well, in Europe, they lined up around the block for Jim Carrey. And the film grossed over $200 million overseas. It's absolutely sick. That's not something that was expected when Premiere Magazine, Hollywood Reporter, when they were making their guesses, as they always did. There's nothing wrong with that. When they would have like top 20, 1994, what were the expectations? Now, the expectation for The Mask was it was going to be a hit because the buzz was very good, but they weren't expecting $351 million worldwide gross. That is crazy. This is 30 years ago. This was like a minor character, but it had that kind of Tex Avery, old school Warner Brothers, Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century. It had that kind of feel to it in certain sequences. Jim Carrey was already working on Dumb and Dumber as The Mask landed. And right around this time, and this is where I talked about this as far as Clint Eastwood while he was making A Perfect World. He had wrapped In the Line of Fire. In the Line of Fire was almost completed at the time of the 1993 Oscars, where Clint won Best Picture and Best Director, because he was part of the production, Malpaso Productions, man from Malpaso, Clint Eastwood. You know, Clint Eastwood's name comes up with a lot of different people, Quentin Tarantino and Jim Carrey. In the case of Tarantino, because Clint was the jury chairperson at the 1994 Cannes Film Festival, which the Palme d'Or was won by Quentin Tarantino, and Clint was instrumental in, that film's selection. But Clint, 1993, wins 2 Oscars. In the Line of Fire is wrapped. Buzz is already building. Might be the best film of the summer. This might be the most exciting film in Clint's career. It might be better than Dirty Harry. For sure is going to be an enormous hit. There could be Oscar nominations galore. Clint was working on A Perfect World with Kevin Costner at this time. Now, A Perfect World made a lot of money overseas. Great reviews. There were critics that it's better than Unforgiven. This is easily the best film in Clint's career, but it underperformed at the box office. But when you talk about somebody, when the career just happens to click on all cylinders, Clint Eastwood in 1993, things were clicking on all cylinders. Jim Carrey in 1994, not only did he have Ace Ventura, a huge hit out of nowhere, The Mask way outperforming expectations, and the buzz on Dumb and Dumber as it turned to fall, people were saying, early screenings are pretty favorable. The film isn't quite finished, but we're getting feedback that people are laughing when they're supposed to, and that Jim has better chemistry with Jeff Daniels. I thought Jeff Daniels kind of weird casting, but he sells it. However, before Dumb and Dumber came out, Hollywood was abuzz because Batman Forever, the third Batman film, which was supposed to star, returning one final time, we thought, in the cowl, and it ended up not being the case, Michael Keaton. See, it's easy for us to look back historically on Batman Forever and say, it's prime Val Kilmer. What a great choice. It was a great choice. But Val came in late. That's what she said. But Val got there late because Michael Keaton left the project. But before all that, before the release of Dumb and Dumber, after the enormous success of The Mask, Warner Brothers and Joel Schumacher, they're trying to find a Riddler. You already had the Joker, right? in the first one with Jack and Michael Keaton, Kim Basinger, Robert Wall, great cast, Pat Hingle, Billy D. Williams. And the second one, you got Danny DeVito, the Lifetime end boss cheat code actor as Penguin, and the always fire Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman. Christopher Walken, Max Schreck, a little wink in joke. Now everybody knows who Max Schreck is because of the new Nosferatu and comparing the original and Robert Eggers and Bill Skarsgård. But Warner Brothers needed someone to play the Riddler. And there had been talk going all the way back to Aladdin that Robin Williams, when they make Batman 3, they didn't know that it was going to be Batman Forever at that point. But there was buzz for a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And some of you fellow Gen Xers might remember this if you were as big into movies as I was at the time. Robin Williams was going to play the Riddler. I don't know what went wrong. I feel like Robin told a story, and unfortunately I'm blanking on it in the moment. He wasn't offered the role, or he wasn't signed, but it was not just rumor. Sometimes rumors are, in fact, just rumors. It could be a person speculating and hoping that a certain actor or actress is interested in a part. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I feel like Robin as the Riddler, it got a little bit further along than that. But I remember being at a diner. I think could have been the Massapequa Diner, but it was sometime in 1994 in the fall. And a front page of the Daily News, it was a picture of Jim Carrey, and it was something to the effect of, great idea, Jim Carrey cast as the Riddler. New star Jim Carrey will play the Riddler in the next Batman film. It was something like that. That's a year. Because not only did he get cast, that movie ended up dollar for dollar being the biggest hit in the Batman franchise. It made, 500 million worldwide, maybe more. Again, 29, almost 30 years ago. You do the math, the numbers are staggering beyond imagination. The casting of Jim Carrey in Batman Forever, the movie's okay. There's been a lot of talk that Joel Schumacher had prepared a longer cut, which was a lot better. But summer movie season, you got to cut to the chase more. No pun intended. Nicole Kidman's character, Chase Meridian, great name. I thought the film was okay. Batman Forever was okay. I enjoyed it. I've seen it, probably 3 or 4 times from start to finish. It's very colorful. The action sequences are staged very well. Schumacher, it's not Schumacher's best film. The Lost Boys to me will always be Schumacher's finest work. It's just about perfect. I didn't see, as I pointed out, I didn't see Ace Ventura in theaters. I did see The Mask. I saw The Mask in theaters twice. You know that I really like a film historically if I see it twice in theaters. There really aren't that many movies I saw twice in theaters. I saw LA Confidential twice, once in September of 97 when it first, landed in theaters. And then it had an Oscar when it qualified, they brought it back into theaters. I don't think it had hit VHS yet. Talk about how old that is. I saw The Truman Show 2 times in a row and 3 times in its opening weekend. Speaking of Jim Carrey. Sometimes it just works out that way. But I didn't love Dumb and Dumber. Didn't love it. Saw it opening night, Movies at Sunrise Mall, a movie theater I just mentioned in yesterday's podcast. It's long since gone the way of the dodo. 1998, the last movie that I saw at the Movies at Sunrise Mall, Massapequa, Alex Proyas, Dark City, maybe the most underseen, underrated sci-fi masterpiece in the history of cinema. I mean, that fucking film is incredible. But that theater was gone in 98. But I saw Dumb and Dumber, and if you ask me of Jim Carrey's, the first burst of kind of crazy comedies, it's certainly my least favorite of those 3. The Mask, to me, is the best movie of the 3. On top of how much fun it is, it introduced audiences to Cameron Diaz. And Cameron Diaz is fucking awesome. She's so good in so many different roles throughout her career. And I know she's, semi-retired. She doesn't need to work. It's like, I don't hold it against people who step away. Daniel Day-Lewis, after Phantom Thread, he said he was retiring. I hoped that he would come back, and apparently he has come back. You think about being so in demand that Spielberg, Scorsese, Coppola, everybody wants to talk to you. If you change your mind, it's almost like a Jewish grave. If you change your mind, I can make you some mandel bread. If you change your mind, I have a role for you opposite, whoever it might be. Dumb and Dumber, though, I feel like I don't want to say in the minority. I didn't react as well to the movie as a lot of other people did. And, I respect the Farrelly brothers. They did things also that hadn't been done before. My reaction to Dumb and Dumber was similar to my reaction to There's Something About Mary. I saw There's Something About Mary opening day in a mostly crowded theater in the Broadway Mall in Hicksville, for you Long Islanders. And the whole sequence of Ben Stiller with the zipper, that I did not laugh. I was horrified, and I couldn't believe that they had put it. This is really part of the movie. This is not an outtake. Meantime, the people around me are screaming and crying. They're laughing so hard. So in Dumb and Dumber, there is a similar sequence where Jim Carrey plays a little bit of not even a practical joke. He's mad with Jeff Daniels' character. I forget who's Harry and who's Lloyd. I don't remember. I think that Jeff Daniels is Harry and Jim is Lloyd. But he plays a disgusting, literally joke on him where he gives him like extra kaopectate or something that's going to give him the runs. You're really a regular guy, aren't you? I thought that was just gross out humor. Literally what we used to call toilet humor. Nail meat head, right? I did not find that funny. I didn't even find it a little bit funny. The people on either sides of me, in front of me, and behind me, they were screaming louder during that gross out moment than during the extended Ben Stiller gets his private parts caught in a zipper. 3.5 years later, There's Something About Mary. Just didn't hit me. I just didn't think it was funny. Now, when they talk about 1 in a million, what are the chances? So you're saying there's a chance. That I was laughing. And without spoiling, at the end of the movie where they can't really see the forest for the trees. From a conceptual standpoint, I thought that was a perfect way to end the film. So I would give Dumb and Dumber 3 stars out of 4. But Ace Ventura and The Mask would both be 3.5 out of 4. Dumb and Dumber does not make my Jim Carrey top 5. Probably makes top 10. Man on the Moon and The Truman Show, 1 and 1 egg. You can flip a coin. They're both masterpiece films. 2 all-time filmmakers, right? Peter Weir with The Truman Show and the late, great Milos Forman for Man on the Moon, it's just spectacular. Carrey basically playing 2 roles. He plays Andy Kaufman, the guy the movie is about, and Andy Kaufman's alter ego, Tony Clifton. Why don't you go with it? Get out of here! But Dumb and Dumber, released on this day, 1994, to enormous box office, lots of repeat business. Jim Carrey began 1994 as a kind of fringe name, fringe star in Living Color. The Wayans brothers, I should have mentioned them sooner. They were, if anything, more instrumental in his career blowing up than even Clint or Rodney. Clint really helped, though. Clint just loved him. And the joke was that when he saw Jim a couple of years, but right before he blew up, he said that he had a tape of some of Jim's, stuff that either Jim had given him, like audition tape, but some of the outtakes from the Deadpool. And he told him, he said, I like to show your tape to my friends. How embarrassing is that? And Jim got such a kick out of it. He says, I just, he was a fan. And sometimes in Hollywood, you end up working with somebody that you're just a fan of, whether you're older than them or they're older than you or more experienced. It's the nature of the business. Everyone is creative. Everyone's talented. But there are certain people that do a certain thing as well or better than anyone. And Jim Carrey, if I'm asked to name 5 most talented people to ever work in the movie business, I'm naming him. Because he's a really good dramatic actor. Even films like The Majestic, the Frank Darabont film, that kind of underwhelmed and underperformed. There was a lot of Oscar buzz around it. I think he's really great in that. But I believe he should have gotten a Best Actor nomination for both The Truman Show and Man on the Moon. Didn't happen. But Dumb and Dumber, 30 years old today, released on this day, and a perfect capper to Also, top 5 greatest individual years an actor has ever had. 3 huge movies and getting 12 million plus percentage of the gross. In the following years, Batman Forever, which was a massive box office hit, partially because of Seal's song "Kiss from a Rose." That probably added at least 15 to 20% of business, but that song was just on an endless loop on every radio station. And the video with MTV, which had Seal kind of interacting with, unbelievable. But yeah, sometimes you just hit, everything goes your way. 1994 for Jim Carrey, extraordinary. And Dumb and Dumber, released December 16, 1994. This has been episode 385 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Monday evening here with me in New York. And if you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then.